Hello, you're tuned into Coast to Coast Real Estate with Jaqueline Steib. This podcast will take us all across the globe as we learn the ins and outs of real estate from the industry's top advisors. Here we are now with Jaqueline Steib.
Welcome to Coast Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Jaqueline Steib with Vista, Sotheby's International Realty, broadcasting simultaneously from two beautiful California cities today. Yes, I didn't go too far today. We are today in Manhattan Beach, California and La Jolla, California. Yeah, talk about having a rough life. In today's episode, we will get to know Chantal Sanchez. Chantal is with Pacific Sotheby's International Realty. Without further ado, allow me to introduce you to Chantal. Welcome, Chantal, and thank you for sharing your time with me and my listeners.
Well, thank you so much, Jacqueline, for having me on here. I'm really excited.
My pleasure. Could you tell us a little bit about you? Who are you?
Well, that's a very deep question, but, I'll start from the surface. My name is Chantal Sanchez. I live in La Jolla, but I'm originally from Long Beach, which is not that far. Although I have traveled quite a bit. I've lived in Chicago, Toronto, Montreal, Quebec City, and, I have family from Europe. So I like to think that I come from a well-rounded background. I am a mother of three. And the funny thing, actually, as you know, you and I have a connection through my husband and your husband's family. I think they knew each other. So that's kind of a funny connection that we have as well. And now here I am, and I'm a real estate agent in La Jolla.
Tell me about your green designation. I know not everybody knows what that means.
Right. It's a designation from the National Association of Realtors, and it's basically just means that we are specialized and educated in sustainable housing, in sustainable materials, in energy efficiency, and really just lowering the carbon footprint in the real estate industry. We might not think of it as something important, but believe it or not, there's a lot of emissions from a home that do go into the atmosphere and causes greenhouse gases. So we don't really, again, like I said, we don't normally think of that. But for example, the R22 and the HVAC systems, the reason they phased those out is because that's one of the second pollutants after automobiles. So it's really important just to be able to educate clients and those not only just who are interested in solar panels, but those also who are interested in creating more of an energy efficiency and lowering sometimes even their bill. People don't realize that there's a connection with the financial part of efficiency. So sometimes it's a little bit of an investment on the, especially if it's a seller or a homeowner, but they will usually get on average at least 6% of a higher turnaround if they try to sell it. So it's worth it. And like I said, you're also reducing the carbon footprint, which I think is so important.
The builder of my house, the first remodel that we did, worked so hard to make sure that our house was a greenhouse. So
oh, wow, that's good.
He did a great job on that. Drove us a little crazy because then again, we didn't know anything. But once he started sharing his knowledge, it was like, okay, we can definitely do that. Yeah.
And that's kind of where I started with that. What inspired me was in the desert. Before I came to La Jolla, I was in the high desert, Palm Springs, Joshua Tree area, where I worked with off-grid builders. And actually the team that I'm very, very proud of have worked with is the company called Baltic Sands. And it's an all-women builder team, which is, I think, incredible. And they're originally from South Africa and parts of Europe, but they created these off-grid homes that were 100% sustainable and in Joshua Tree, which is so important. But I do think that you could build the same homes anywhere. I mean, it's not just in the high desert where it might be more of a necessity. It really can be anywhere. So again, if someone is trying to create a more efficient home, they wouldn't know where to start. And that's where my green designation comes in. We can even start from the windows. Just sometimes having older single pane windows, you're spending a lot more money on your air conditioner. And in turn, that's not really necessarily good for the environment. But yeah, even just creating audits too. We're trained to do energy audits in the homes so that people can know where there might be some issues that they could fix.
So interesting. Tell me, how did you ended up in La Jolla?
It's kind of a funny story by itself because I was in the desert for 4 years before coming from Long Beach at the time. We had originally thought to move somewhere to Carlsbad or Encinitas, because during the pandemic, my family and I, we came out to the coast a lot, coming from the ocean, even though Long Beach isn't necessarily a surf beach, but it's definitely just growing up by the beach and by the ocean. It was very comforting for me during the pandemic. And we went to Carlsbad, great, beautiful town, very family friendly. But just as fate would have it, I met a couple of, I wouldn't say colleagues and different people that I knew who basically would say, oh, hey, Chantal, why don't you join REBA, which is one of them is Ed Marchek, which I definitely would like to give him a shout out for what he's done for me. So he basically said, join REBA. Why don't you, I would consider if you're ever thinking to sell anything in La Jolla or in vicinity. So I joined, and then him and I developed a friendship. And when he understood that I was trying to move to San Diego, he said, well, let me ask and see if I can get you to La Jolla because there's an availability in my office. So he asked, and basically just everyone approved, management approved. And right after that, we were looking for, homes because we're kind of looking to place to lease right away. We weren't sure where we were going to live. Within a week, we found a place about 10, 15 minutes away from the office. So
Perfect.
it just kind of happened. And then we moved like 2 weeks later. So it was just, serendipity, I guess, but very, very cool. And, I never thought that I would love, and it's not just La Jolla, but just San Diego in general. I was a very much diehard LBC girl. I went to Long Beach Poly, I went to Cal State Long Beach, and Long Beach always has a little place in my heart, but I never thought that I would just fall in love with this town. It's beautiful. The people are amazing. The food is amazing. The scenery is amazing. I drive to and from work every day looking at the ocean. And it's so inspiring. It's just such an inspiring thing to be able to do that. When, I think I appreciate it coming from the desert where I saw nothing but barren land, which has its own beauty. I don't want to put down the desert at all. It has definitely its own beauty. But I'm just kind of going into, I know your next question, why do I love this city? And it's just, there's really something for everyone. And it's like a bubble, and now even leaving this bubble, I dread it. I'm like, oh man, I have to go to Newport Beach this week. Like, shoot, like I have to leave my little bubble. And, there's everything. There's everything you want here. Great schools, great environment. Like I said, you could go surfing in the morning and then go to work. It's just how many places that you could do that. Maybe, I don't know, Manhattan Beach. I just feel that traffic would be too bad that you wouldn't want to do that.
What's the traffic? Grabbing your board and walking down the street to the.
I don't know, maybe Manhattan Beach. I have no idea. I don't know. Maybe there's no difference between our environments, but I have lived in LA before. I've lived in West Hollywood. I've lived in Sherman Oaks, and there's everything, of course, in LA. It's kind of the epicenter of work and creativity and the entertainment business and everything. But still, I can understand why, what's interesting in La Jolla, most people who live here or have homes here, a lot of them, they might have homes, but it's not where you would think it is. It's a secondary home market, but for people who live elsewhere in San Diego, which I thought was very funny because coming from a market like Palm Springs, where a lot of people live in Seattle, or they might live in Oregon, or, colder, milder, maybe different types of weather environment. But, here, like I said, a lot of the people who have a secondary home in La Jolla live maybe 20 miles away in a different part of San Diego. So
we just don't want to carry our boards all the way.
Right. It's, if you want to go more for the surf town, it's more like Encinitas and Solana Beach and all those areas. But I just thought it was kind of funny, like I said, when I noticed that. And there's just such a sense of community. I'm part of San Diego Association of Realtors, of course, but there's also a sub-membership, like I said, for La Jolla. And it's just really, really nice to feel like community. When you go to have lunch in a certain place, you run into people that you run into everywhere. There's also a sense of, I don't want to say just luxury, but it's definitely very, it kind of reminds me of Beverly Hills in some aspects, just the stores and the shopping and the international part too. I come from a very international town. And so for me, one of the things I really like about La Jolla is it does have UCSD. And with UCSD comes a lot of international students, international professors. The elementary school that my girls go to right now, I think they said they had 100 different languages.
Fabulous.
And I just think that's so cool because we get to meet people from all over the world. And, that's such an enrichment that I don't think you really get anywhere else. And this is what I think makes unique to La Jolla compared to other parts of San Diego. I can go on. I'm sorry. I should go on to the next question, but I really love it here.
Love it. Everybody wants to move to La Jolla now after listening to you and all of the great things you have to say about it. We tend to go when the kids play soccer. They do the traveling team, and then we have a yearly tournament. Well, we don't know when that one's coming, but travel a lot to La Jolla for that reason. Tell me, what's your favorite childhood memory, and where does that take you?
My childhood memory, again, and kind of going back to, there's so many good ones, right? But I would just have to say a simple thing is sounds. We lived in Long Beach off of Juanapero and First, like over by, I think it's Cherry Park or Bixby Park. I forget all the names. And I used to listen to the oceans at night. We lived close enough where I could hear the waves. And we lived in this 2-story home. And I was upstairs. So I just remember the sounds were a little bit stronger where my bedroom was, and just hearing the boats at night, because Long Beach is a port town. So you could hear the horns of the boats. I think that's just one of my best, I guess when I meditate or something, it's kind of one of the places that I go to because it's just so calming and so peaceful. And especially in our industry, which, we need to have a quiet zone. So I think that would be probably one of my best childhood memories.
When you first decided that you were going to do real estate, I don't know, perhaps you always knew this all along, but who was the person who first believed in you?
No doubt my mother-in-law. And the reason I say this, people had told me before that I should go into real estate. And I didn't think at the time that it was for me. And it was, I had a very negative connotation to what being a real estate agent was. And I was so busy doing my PR and media relations, which is what my background was in. It was actually my mother-in-law, Giselle, who influenced me because she used to invest a lot in real estate. So she had mentioned something to me. And when I moved to Palm Springs, I was actually pregnant with our son, and it was the perfect time for me to study. So I studied, and then she just always believed in me and would encourage me to continue to do this. And she thought this was probably the best thing I could do. And to be honest with you, it is, because we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be in La Jolla if it wasn't for real estate. So her.
Thank her for that. How did you join the Sotheby's family?
It was actually through one of the OAs in Palm Springs. So at the time, at first I started with this small brokerage. Right when I got my license, I right away went with this tiny little brokerage. And it was very beneficial because I did learn some things about, there's a difference between tiny little independent boutique brokerages and large corporations. I did get the attention that I needed in the small boutique, but I felt like something was missing. And I'm a very fast learner. So it was kind of like I needed more. And one of my friends worked for Sotheby's in Palm Springs. And she said, you know what, why don't you join this team? I can get you an interview with this team and hopefully they'll hire you. So she did get me the interview, and I did get hired maybe a week or two later. And it was definitely, so I started out in a team, and it was one of the best things. Just the name, the brand, really, I resonated with it. And again, with the whole international brand, it's really hard for me to see with anyone else just because of the brand. I really believe in it, and it makes a difference because I know that whenever I go to a listing appointment or whenever I go anywhere, I have the brand to back me up. And without even saying anything, it's just, this is who we are, this is where we're from, and this is what we can do. So the rest of it, it's just me, obviously doing my due diligence, but it's such a good, anyway, it's a really good brand. So I was very, very happy, and it started my journey. And then I went independent and left the team about a year after that. So, and then here I am in La Jolla. So obviously the brand's done very well for me.
Taking care of you for sure. Take me back to a day when you were showing property. My nose is very strong, so I can smell everything. Mm-hmm. That's probably why I selected this question.
Sure, no, that's fine. I love it.
The time